The motion before the House deals with the extraordinary devastation and trauma left for communities living in regions within Turkiye and Syria as a result of the earthquake that took place on the 6th of February this year, just 2 days ago, in the early hours of the morning. The motion notes, of course, not just that devastation, but indeed the huge loss of life and injury, the high level of destruction to homes and livelihoods, the enormous emotional toll that will be felt, not of course just in Turkey and Syria, but across the world, including here in South Australia, and the thousands of households here in South Australia with families originating in Turkey and Syria and of Turkish and Syrian heritage and Kurdish heritage as well. And indeed, the motion seeks the support of the House that we stand with those communities, those Turkish, Syrian, Kurdish and other communities who are affected deeply by this natural disaster. And as Deputy Leader of the Opposition, of course, this is a motion that the Liberal Party gives its wholehearted support to. As we support those efforts and endeavours that are made to deal with the consequences of this earthquake, which will undoubtedly not just deal with the immediate aftermath, where there is an involvement from Australia that is necessary as part of our role as good global citizens, but indeed in due course will no doubt have a humanitarian consequence as well that is likely to potentially involve a federal government response, potentially including people coming to Australia. And I'm sure, should that be the case, that South Australia as a state and as a community and indeed as government departments will be ready to respond to welcome people here as they seek to rebuild their lives. The scale of the devastation is significant. It is one of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded in the region, not just an earthquake of 7.8 on the Richter scale, which is dramatic in any terms, especially in these areas. 125 aftershocks or more, each of them measuring 4 on the Richter scale or more, any one of which would have been considered quite devastating in other contexts, but to have 125 aftershocks. The deaths of more than 7,800 people that are known of, although, as has been mentioned, the World Health Organization has warned that that is likely to increase dramatically, potentially by tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of injuries, at least 35,000 likely to grow. 13 million people impacted, whether through injury or loss of life or displacement or other significant impacts. Nearly 6,000 buildings that we know of that have been demolished. It's dramatic, and our hearts go out to individuals, families and communities. The federal government has today announced a range of measures, financial support through UNICEF and also personnel to assist with search and rescue. That has been welcomed by the Liberal Party at a federal level. I quote from the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs federally, the Honourable Simon Birmingham, who's identified, and I quote, "There is strong and bipartisan support for Australia's assistance to help people in Turkey and Syria suffering as a result of the devastating earthquakes. Additional support and details released today demonstrate the typically practical and humanitarian nature of Australian assistance." I note that when we have had the South Australian government called upon in the past to provide support to families impacted by devastation, in this case natural disaster, the last two comparable events, comparable is probably the wrong word to use, but if I'm thinking about the evacuation of so many people from Ukraine after Russia's invasion, or indeed so many people from Afghanistan after the withdrawal of the United States, people who came to South Australia were welcomed. They were given support, practical support. I was Education Minister, and I know that in our particularly in our TAFE system with language programs, in schools such as Theberton Senior College and other schools, they were also given support, and South Australia will stand ready. Horrifying images are coming to light highlighting the scale of the damage. The numbers I've talked about are very difficult to conceptualise. The images bring home some of that scale. Buildings collapsing, roads being destroyed, rescue and recovery efforts are extremely challenging. And of course, we are still within that first 72 hours after a natural disaster, that critical time for finding people, finding survivors. Frontline emergency personnel, government officials, NGO volunteers are working under freezing conditions in the local area. And of course, the consequences will not just be physical. Also, there will be significant trauma, significant mental health impacts, and reflected mental health impacts from those further afield. The economic impacts will, of course, be significant, rebuilding and repairing damaged infrastructure, and indeed, I also note heavy snowstorms have recently hit parts of Syria and Turkiye. Today, already cold temperatures are expected to plummet several degrees below zero. So, thank you to all those in the community who have already offered their support to people in our Kurdish, Syrian and Turkish communities here in South Australia. It is so important that support be offered consistently, and indeed there is a fundraising effort through UNICEF that is available to members of the South Australian community who are looking at these images and wondering how they can help. Well, a financial donation through UNICEF is not a bad place to start, through the UNICEF Australian Humanitarian Appeal. To the community leaders of these communities, the opposition extends the wholehearted support offered by the government. Indeed, this House stands together in support of your communities at this difficult time. Our thoughts and sympathy are with all those impacted and all those in the South Australian community who potentially are having some of the worst days of their life at the moment, fearing for loved ones and friends in Turkey and Syria who they may not have heard of. We wish you the best. Our thoughts and prayers are with you, and I commend the motion to the House.